All right, welcome to our final study strategy, Chem 151, which is just managing test anxiety. So what we know is that anxiety or worry during a test impairs our grades. That's pretty obvious and clear. We have lots of evidence for it that test anxiety or worry relates to worse exam scores. So when we map out this structural map of how these different factors influence exams, we see that one's prior SAT score has a positive relationship with exam grades, but test anxiety has a very large negative relationship to exam grades. So the more anxiety we feel during that test, the worse our exam grades are. This is even when we control for a lot of other stuff like procrastination and prior knowledge and emotion and so forth. Another example of this, we had two groups that are learning the same information. Then on the second day, we give one group an acute stressor, and the other group doesn't get a stressor. And what we see is that the stressed group remembers significantly less of what they learned, or they're less able to retrieve that information after they have experienced that stress. So that stress or anxiety or worry at the time of retrieval can really get in the way of our ability to access that information that we have stored. All right, so here's another example of how stress can impact our ability to retrieve the information that we need. Here we had a group of learners in a virtual reality maze that had 8 different arms, and they were learning where different objects were in the maze. So they learned that, and then we randomly assigned them to either a cold or a warm water task where they had to hold their hand in cold or warm water for about 3 minutes. And holding your hand in this water for 3 minutes can be very stressful. That's how we can induce some stress in those learners. Then, right after they were doing the cold or warm water task, we tested how much they could remember or retrieve from their earlier learning. Importantly, both groups learned and studied this equally well, so there was no difference in their learning before we randomly assigned them to the water task. So both groups have learned this equally well before we are subjecting them to that stressful situation. We can see that the stress group, the cold water group, was in fact more stressed than the warm water group. They rated it as much more unpleasant, much more stressful, much more painful. And their body is showing signs of this stress. Their bodies are showing significantly elevated levels of cortisol, meaning their body is reacting to this stress, this cold water, as a stress reaction or response. So what we see in terms of how well they remember this information or are able to retrieve it, the group that underwent the stress is showing significantly more errors than the group that didn't experience that stress right before the test. So they have much more trouble in retrieving the information if they just underwent a stressful condition than if they didn't. It also takes them significantly more time to do the task. So stress caused more errors and slowed the participants down. They couldn't access or retrieve the information that they had learned. We again see this in introductory biology students at the University of Washington. The test anxiety is impairing exam scores, has a significantly negative impact on how well you perform on the exam, even when controlling for GPA. So how can we manage this test anxiety so that we don't become affected by it, so it doesn't impair our exam performance? There's a few different ways. One of the main ways is through breathing techniques. A very common one is 4-7-8 breathing, where you breathe in your nose for 4 seconds, you hold a breath for 7 seconds, and you breathe out of your mouth for 8 seconds. Then you repeat the cycle 4 to 8 times. This downregulates your body's tension, arousal, and anxiety, and reduces that impact on you significantly. So these breathing exercises are really important for managing or reducing that test anxiety. Breathing exercise is the first one. Second idea to manage test anxiety is really to use practice test questions quite a bit. The more we are using practice test questions, the less anxiety we will feel during the actual test. So that will also reduce our test anxiety. And the last idea that's gaining a lot more traction and evidence is just that how we view that arousal matters. If we view the arousal during a test as exciting, useful, engaging, and helpful, it's actually going to help our performance and not hurt it. So if we can reinterpret how we're seeing that arousal, it can actually be a beneficial thing. So these are just some ideas about how we can manage our test anxiety so that it doesn't significantly impair our exam performance.